colonial administration which he served and whose politics he detested. It was mainly young men who went on these expeditions. They would take a few provisions and go to the open hills, disappear for the whole day, sometimes for weeks and months. They often didn't have a particular destination. To go on a sarha was to roam freely, at will, without restraint. The verb form of the word means to let the cattle out to pasture early in the morning, leaving them to wander and graze at liberty. The commonly used noun sarha is a colloquial corruption of the classical word. A man going on a sarha wanders aimlessly, not restricted by time and place, going where his spirit takes him to nourish his soul and rejuvenate himself. But not any excursion would qualify as a sarha. Going on a sarha implies letting go. It is a drug-free high, Palestinian style. There was a time, I'm told, when the hills around Ramallah were one large cultivated garden with a house by every spring. Olive trees dotted their slopes and grapevines draped the terrace walls. But by the late 1970s, when I returned from my law studies in London, these hills were no longer being cultivated. Except for the indomitable olive trees, nothing that had been planted was growing in them. They had become an extensive nature reserve with springs and little ponds where frogs hopped undisturbed and deer leapt up and down the terrace walls where it was possible to walk unimpeded. I'll skip that. When I returned from my studies and began practicing law in Ramallah, the occupation was in its 11th year, with little prospect of ending. Insidious but significant changes in the law provided strong indications of Israel's long-term policies towards the occupied territories, my home. Few seemed to be paying attention. A disquieting silence left me anxious and worried. The hills began to be my refuge against the practices of the occupation, both manifest and surreptitious, and the restrictions traditional Palestinian society imposed on our life. I walked in them for escape and rejuvenation. The land around Ramallah is varied, but without large open areas. It is part of the central highlands that dominate most of the center of the West Bank. The valleys close to town are narrow. The hills are steep, sometimes precipitous. There are no mountains anywhere in sight, only hills. The further west you walk, the lower and rounder the hills become as the land descends gently down to the coastal plain. All you can see are hills and more hills, like being in a choppy sea with high waves, the unbroken swells only becoming evident as the land descends westward. This landscape, we are told, was formed by the tremendous pressure exerted by tectonic forces pushing towards the east. It is as though the land has been scooped in a mighty hand and scrunched, the pressure eventually resulting in the great fault that created Jordan's Rift Valley, through which runs the River Jordan. The land seems never to have relaxed into plains and glens with easy-flowing rivers, but has been constantly twisted and pressured to the point of cracking. Its surface is not unlike that of a gigantic walnut. My starting point on that day was behind the Anglican school in the northern-western neighborhood of Ramallah. I walked down the newly paved, that's the school that you would have reached just a few meters away from my house.
St. George?
No, the Anglican school.
Oh.